In this tutorial I'm going to show you how you can create a game room. First, as you can see, I have in our lobby scene created just a couple of components. It's nothing special, I'm going to show you, but I did it just so we don't waste time on it. As every game is going to have its unique style, the only thing we have here is a list of rooms. So every time we create a room, it's going to be displayed here. And the next thing we have is the actual input field and a create room button. So the name of the room. And when we click on create room, we're going to want to create that room. Nothing else. Now, the next part will be, before we connect this to the server, we actually want to do this locally. So I want, if we start the lobby scene, to be able to create the room only by clicking on create room and display it right here. So let's do this first. To do that, as we have our room name, let's just create a couple of scripts. The first one will be, just go to the scripts folder and let's create a new C# script and let's call it room item component. And let's open it. So this one we're going to use to change when we create a new room and we want to display it over here. We want to set this object with a new name. So that's what this component will do. In order to do that, we need to access our text of our button. So we're just going to pass to be using text mesh pro, and then create a new variable for our text mesh pro text field. Let's call it room. Now to set our name, let's create a new method which will be set room name and pass inside a string which will be the name. Now if we type room dot text equals name, the next time we pass something to this method, it will change our text of the button. Now let's go back to our project. We need to create a prefab out of this room, and because we created a new script for it, we can just first add our script or room item component and then drag our text inside the room variable. Now let's create a new folder and call it prefabs. Oops. And just drag the room component in it. Now we can delete it from here. The next script we want to create is for create room button. Let's go to our scripts folder and create the script. Let's call it create room component. Now this script will contain a bit more stuff than only what our button will do. We would like to have access to our prefab we just created. So we're going to be creating a game object for it. Let's call it room prefab. Then we would like to have a way to access our input field for the name we want to choose for our room. And because the input field contains text mesh pro input field, we're going to be using text mesh pro here, and then create a variable of type text mesh pro input field, and let's call it room name. Also, the next part is we want to create a method which will access every time we click the create room button. So let's call it public void create room on click. Now what we do every time we create that room is just we need to instantiate our prefab we created inside our list. So that means we need to have one more variable here, which will be another game object for our room list. Now we can first connect our variables to the elements we need. Let's go to our button and add the script to it. Then we can just drag everything inside. So first, let's drag our input field to our room name. Then we go to our prefabs and we just drag our prefab to the room prefab. And last, we need our list of rooms, which is where all the rooms we create will be placed. Now let's go back to our component script. And inside create room, we need to instantiate our room prefab every time we click on this button. So we just do game object room equals instantiate, then we pass our room prefab, and then we pass the parent object, which is our room list dot transform. That's how we say we wanna place this room prefab in this list, in this game object. Now what we wanna do next is we want to access our room item component, and we know that the prefab has this component in it. So we can do this by writing room item component. Let's create this variable, and we say this will be of type room item component, and we can access it from room dot get component room item component. Now this way we have access to our method we just created, which is set room name. So every time we click on the create room button, we create our room prefab inside of the list, and then we set name for it. And the name will be from our input field, so we just type room name dot text. Let's save. Now let's go back here, go to our button, and we want to pass our create component and access our create room on click. Now if we start the lobby and type a room name, test room, click create, we can see we have a room created. Now keep in mind, this is only locally. Now the next part will be to create this on our server as well. In order to do that, as we mentioned before, everything that's being connected to the server, be it if we want to receive something or we want to send something, will be inside our networking manager. Now you can see that the networking manager is only inside our login. Every time we change scenes with our don't destroy and load, the networking manager will be kept there. That's very good, but currently if we go to the lobby, we don't have access to anything inside the networking manager. So that's a problem for now when we want to use it actually. So how do we do that? There is actually a very cool way I like to use. And there are many ways to do this actually, but this is how I prefer to use it, and it's by using delegates. If you're not familiar with delegates, don't worry, I think you'll love it, and if you've actually worked with events before, it's very similar to that. So yeah, you'll see. Now let's open our scripts folder again, and let's create a new script. Let's call it global callbacks, and let's open it. Now this script won't be with mono behavior. We're just going to create a static class. So delete everything in it. And here we're going to be putting all our delegates. So I'm just going to write the code and then explain it while I'm showing how it works. because we want to have our button on the click event to create a room, we're just going to be calling it on create room. Every room will have a name, so I'm passing here a parameter which we'll call name. Just in case, we make a check if this is null, and if it's not, we pass our name. And we should also add here the name as well. Now, this represents our delegate, how we're going to set the value and how we're going to use it. Now, to make things more clear, just wait a bit more and you'll see what I mean by that. If we go to our component, the create room one, instead of doing this right here, first we're going to do it a bit differently because we want this to be accessed from the server and not from here. So if the server says the room is created, only then we're going to create this room, not when we click the create button, because this can cause a lot of problems. So let's just put this on a separate field, which will be room create room, and paste it. Now this button, the first thing it needs to do is send that we have clicked the button to our server. And we do that by this delegate. Now we can just do the following: global callbacks dot and then set on create room. Now we pass our room name dot text. You can think of this as just an event, and this is triggering our event. Now we want to receive this on the other end, and the other end is networking manager. Now, even if you have not worked with delegates or events before, this is actually the same thing. We're going to be doing the same thing as message received, as you can see here. So let's write global callbacks dot callback on create plus equals, and then let's just copy the same name. This name will be the name of the method inside this inside the networking manager, so this can be anything, but we can keep it the same just to make things more simple. And then here is the same but with minus, so every time it's destroyed, we should not call this anymore. Now let's create the delegate, the new method, and pass it the name. So every time currently we click this button, global callbacks is called, and then the script, the networking manager script, because it's not being deleted and it's still alive in our lobby, it's triggering the callback on create room, and then everything here is being triggered. You know, as you can see, it's very simple looking. It's if you try it 1 or 2 times, you'll get the hang of it. But I think you'll love it, because this allows you so many things. And in the future tutorials, even with not DarkRift, we're going to be using delegates on many places, because this way, by calling this method here, imagine if you have multiple places, not only the networking manager, but many more files, many more scripts, and if you call the same callback over here on awake in every other script, it will be called simultaneously. So This over here will trigger everywhere where we call the callback on create room, which is very cool. And I see we've made a mistake here. We can just fix it. Create room. Okay. Now, what we want to do here is send a message to the server saying, hey, we want to create a new room with this name. And as we know, in order to do that, let's go to our server, to our tags, and create a new tag, which will be create room. Let's give it some value, maybe 8. Usually separating the values here, you can maybe do even something different. I've seen some places people like to separate it, like for login maybe it's 10, 11, for something else will be like 100, 101. You know, it really depends how you wanna do this. But in our case, we're not going to be creating so large projects, so just simple numbers, it's okay. So, when we created our tag, we also want to have a response from the server to the client to say, hey, yes, you can create this room. Create room success, and let's give it a value of 9. Also, we can go to the main plugin and just read here the request. As we know, we also need to create a new class we're going to be serializing, which will be create room. And it's similar to the user login, so we just pass room name. Let's just call it name. Name. Okay. Now go back to our plugin. Okay. Now again, we need to create one more serializer, which will be for create room successful. We're not going to pass anything. Again, the same thing as login successful. And over here, let's copy this on create room successful. We're just going to be returning a simple request. Okay. Now, the next part will be to create the actual room inside our server. Like we have a user here, we would like to have a room model. So let's just copy the user and paste it and rename it to room. Now this model will contain everything about this room. Currently we have only a name, so just let's create a simple string and call it room name, or just name. Again, this is getter and setter. That's everything we need. Let's go back to the plugin and let's create our room here. So when we pass the create room, we just go room equals new room and pass the name from the create room serializer, which will be this. Now we have our room created and we send it back to our client to say, yes, we just created the room, and we can output it inside the Unity game. Something we forgot to do is actually change our tag here. So let's just change it to create room success. Now let's build our projects. When we go back to our networking manager, we would like to send our create room message to the server. So let's just copy this because it will be similar. And we just type create room. And again, we can see it's actually not accessible. So let's restart our IntelliSense. Now we have our create room, and we would like to pass to the name of the room. Okay, now every time this is triggered, we are sending our room name to the server. The next part is we need to catch our room success, so we just catch it the same as the user login. I can also keep the log. And inside here, we're going to be doing the same thing we just did before. If we go to our create room component, we want to show our room again the same way we did it before, but this was locally, and now we want to access this whenever the server returns the successful message. So we do this again the same way with delegate method. Let's copy this and say on create room success. So let's create just a new delegate and replace everything here. We don't need the name because we have it locally. Now let's go back to our networking manager, and every time the success message is returned, let's call the global callbacks set on create room success. Then when we go to our room component, we need to create our awake, and on destroy methods, now the same way we accessed our delegate, we can just copy it from here, and instead of on create room, we're just going to be using this callback instead. On destroy, the same thing but with a minus, and then let's create our method which is called on create. Again, this can be called anything. This can be even like this, the create room. It doesn't really matter. This name is completely up to you, like every other name, but just this on the right side is different from the left one. Just don't get confused. And we can access now the create room here. Even let's make this private so it's more clear what we're doing. Now we can actually test everything out, and keep in mind this time we're going to log in to our game, and then we're going to send a message to the server, and if this message to the server says hey, the room is created, then the room is going to be created over here. Now let's open our server and our login scene. Let's click play, enter memory, our name, click on login. As we can see, we're logged in the lobby like last time, and then let's type a room name, which will be test room 1. Click on create room, and as we can see, now our test room is here. So again, we logged in, the server returned successful message, then we clicked on create room button, we used delegates. As you can see, it's very cool. We use delegates to just say hey, from here we want to access over here. This method sends the create room to the server, and then the server returns us the success message. And again, we use delegates to access the method over here which says create the room element in our Unity game. That was it. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked the tutorial. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe for more.